Welcome to Rude Awakening, the podcast. We assume that you're here because you've watched our documentary, and we would just love to take the conversation a little further in a weekly format. We will come together, discuss quotes and inspirations from the documentary, and invite you, our followers, into the conversation with us.
You want the break from always being spiritual, always being like, am I on? Am I on? Am I thinking? Am I analyzing? Is it solid? Have some fun. Go to the zoo one day. Just walk around, look at the animals. It doesn't have to be a spiritual experience. I don't have to analyze everything. If a bird lands in a tree next to me, I don't have to wonder if that's like, my grandmother, or is that a message like, it's a black and white bird. Is that about duality? It's just a bird. It's just fun. I'm here on this planet. There's birds.
Welcome everybody, welcome Jonathan. We're here for the second episode of the Rude Awakening podcast. I am your host Sandra. I'm here with my wonderful co-host Jonathan Cray.
Hi.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. It's been a week.
It's been a week,
yeah. It's fascinating what's happening with the period after the 22nd, releasing the movie, and just having enough time to actually land the things I didn't have time for, or I convinced myself I didn't have time for. So yeah, massive integration.
Yeah, it feels like switching gears after having been so busy and occupied with getting the movie out there, and now it's just like, okay, now we're switching the phases, we're switching onto a different mode, and this is a lot of fun for me personally, because that means that we can now show up in front of things and not only have to take care of the other stuff. So this is fun, especially now going into the great quotes that motivate us to do this podcast. Today we've picked a great quote by Marisa Calvi. There's birds, Jonathan. What's your take on that?
You're on the planet, there's birds. I love this one so much because it just makes it normalizes the fact that there is a human experience, there is a divine experience, and we're now basically trying to combine the two, but it's not mutually exclusive. It's not, I have to completely clean my human to get the divine in, or I have to make sure my human is rid of anything between the divine. So I love the quote. It's just at this point, can you just relax, allow, and don't read into so much. Don't let your mind go over time about what things mean. But just, you're done. Can we finally allow ourselves to be done, to be graduated, to trust that magic? And so yeah, it's a very important one to me.
For me, going into the whole journey of awakening and trying out the spirituality and trying out the different modes of being versus just being the human pre-awakening, where you're so immersed in the hustle and bustle, you're so identified with it, you are so one with that what you're experiencing. Then going into spirituality, you almost at that point want to make sure that you immerse yourself so deeply into the spirituality that you kind of overwrite that perception of, oh, I'm just a human being. So you want to tell yourself a new narrative, like constantly reinforce, okay, I'm a spiritual being. And for me, that was the time when it started, that I was so diving deep and only being spiritual, that everything was only about that. I remember speaking to my sister at some point, and she was like, you're no fun to hang around with anymore, because you don't talk about other people anymore. It's just no fun with you anymore. And I get that, but for me it was a really important phase to just become such a different persona, that then I could go, okay, now that I'm starting to believe that part, then you can dial it back, right? Wouldn't you say? How was it for you?
Similar. I mean, I had my awakening when I was 17 through kind of a traumatic experience, and then I started studying spirituality hard, and really also from a perspective or paradigm that I thought, I don't want this old life. I don't want to have this trauma again. I want to better myself. So everything was about the other side, spiritual things and courses, and but I was lucky enough to also do something. I worked for computer games a long time, so I had to stay very grounded in one side of reality with my human, while the other one was exploring spirituality. So I always had both, and I always felt, and you know this about me, like I always felt it was so important to bring the human along somehow. So as I was sort of connecting to that divine self, I never truly believed that I should turn my human off. But I also didn't know how to deal with my human, because the human side is always sabotaging everything. So I think for me, I just tried to connect desperately to the divine part in me, and then after a while, and actually the last few years, it's more about leveling out both. So allowing the human to make enough connections with the divine that it knows it's there, and then the other way, and then calming down, letting the divine back in, instead of the human trying to fix the divine or make the divine work. It's now the human relaxing to let the divine into itself. So it's basically from outside in instead of from inside out. And that was such a big confusion. I had that confusion for a long time, that I thought my human had to do it. Yeah. And that my human had to pay attention and always be on, like you're saying, like always be on and read, the clouds are a certain way. Oh, the star charts are a certain way. It's solstice. It's just literally planetary movements.
Yeah, but isn't it interesting, like you say, you came into your awakening out of a traumatic experience, which I think a lot of listeners might be able to connect with. Is it maybe that we're using that entry point a little bit as an avoidance of, let's avoid going through that same trauma again, so I need to completely try to become better at it?
Absolutely, because I really didn't like my human. I didn't like what I was becoming, and that traumatic event when I was 17 was just a catalyst of being in life in a certain way and not dealing with stuff since I was 8. So it was a trauma that almost was a catalyst for even earlier trauma, and God knows what trauma from past lives, but let's just stick in this life. So at 17 it just popped, and I had to just deal with it. And of course I hated that part of myself. I hated that I didn't connect with society. I hated that I thought I was an introvert. I hated that I was unable to connect to relationships in a balanced way, et cetera, et cetera. So I tried desperately to fix myself. But of course, we all know, when you say there's something wrong with me, the only thing you're doing is enforcing that more and more, instead of saying, I forgive myself and I'm completely okay the way I am, but now from a free place, can I make a different choice? And
but that
took 30 years.
That eagerness to better yourself, that ambition, and the, excelling as the best student in class kind of thing. The human judgment would say that's just replacing the one thing for the other. But really, in the end, it made sure that we came to the place of knowing both really well.
Yeah.
And I remember when my spiritual journey started, after I realized that I was in my awakening and I really dove deep into spirituality. I was a young mother, so I had 2 small children that took up all of my attention and focus, and I hated it because I was so interested and so curious and so desperate to find meaning in my life that I almost discarded the meaning of the human, being a mother, being there for your children,
yeah.
just realizing, oh, now I have children, shit, like, but I want it to be spiritual, like, you know.
It's almost like you don't have time for it now.
Yeah, and I remember how much it used to annoy me, and this is not going to be popular with woke mothers.
Close your ears.
The part that as soon as I was trying to really focus on meditation and become, you know, quiet my mind, which was always on, you know, talking about being on all of the time, my mind was on all of the time. So the part of me that was so immersed in being a mother was very much pushed to the background, and very much I tried to escape that through the spiritual experiences. I tried to, you know, if I was able to get away for a weekend, I was just really savoring each moment that I was able to just be by myself and do the spiritual thing. And then coming back home, and then mama. This was just like, for me, the friction between the one identity of the human mother and the other identity of the awakening, or as, you know, I probably thought at the time that I was already, you know, hard in my enlightenment already, which, you know, looking back was just.
But isn't that interesting? What you just described is a huge separation between two worlds.
Big friction.
And it does. I don't think it really matters. I mean, I don't have kids, but kids are demanding. But for me, it was society. It was my job. It was like I had to, you know, society or my environment was constantly nagging and constantly distracting me and constantly tugging at my shirt for attention. And it wasn't kids, but, you know, I was so dependent on a certain, you know, attention and you know, a certain love from the outside that I fell for that just the same, you know. So it's funny how, and then having to recuperate at home and, you know, or walk endless distances to find myself again. It's kind of the same. There's a huge separation between the spiritual side, or, you know, the heaven that we think is near or is on top of the mountain, and then dealing with being in life and actually discarding it or being angry at life.
And really looking back now, I think it was such a great setup. It was such a great idea of my true self to have kids at that time when I was 26 and 28, because it really grounded me and it really brought me into the now. There was no escaping that. I was living far away from my family. There was no grandma or granddad that could have looked after the children. So I needed to make it work. And my spiritual journey coinciding with that early time of, you know, the kids being so young. I came back from those retreats and I remember trying to savor the weekend, trying to savor those experiences that were so sacred for me. So, you know, being in my balanced mode or into the Zen, you know, meditative, enlightened self, and trying to hold on to that for as long as I could. And I usually, like, round about come Tuesday, Wednesday, I used to crash and burn always.
Yeah.
So I was able to hold on to it for a little bit by just going la 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 la, you know, this is all not happening. And now I think this was my modus of grounding me. This was my way of introducing that, okay, you know, you have to really be present. You have to be here. And there was one moment that I remember where I thought, it's becoming so boring for me to keep immersing myself and wanting to make that feeling last, making that feeling of being meditative and good with myself and aligned and all of that. And I thought, okay, I'm trying to squeeze this huge self, my soul, into such a small human separated focus. No wonder it didn't work. So how about I allow my human into the spiritual life rather than trying to squeeze my spiritual life into the human? For me, that made a huge difference. That was like, oh, okay. It was just a switch of perspectives. And I would love to hear from you. Like, how do you think, because it's all just a belief or a focus or a perspective, how does that play into that time of becoming or becoming aware?
Huge. I think that was huge. I think I did the same thing. I I projected my human into spirituality, or getting my human into courses and expanding. First is really good, expanding my awareness, learning what feeling is like, learning how to deal with my sensitivity. But like you say, it got really boring really fast, and it almost like I had to change modalities faster and faster. That's why I did so much spiritual stuff, because it was getting stale almost immediately. So I do one course in NLP, and then you go, oh my God, this is so mental, and I do another one and another one and another one, and just keep grinding until, basically I ran out of options. And then finally going, shit, what is it that I'm not getting? And for me, it was so separating the human from the divine, and trying to live in that divine house, which is also mine, but the divine house has no physical, no human connection. And then coming back into the human body after a session, and then feeling pain, and feeling the same pain, the physical pain or emotional pain, having the same problems, it never really went away. So ultimately, I think the big switch was when I started really diving into my own human, my own inner, and started slowly accepting my anger, my pain, started accepting the human, because that's the one that was sabotaging it. I could do the most spiritual courses in the planet, but my human, because it didn't feel part of it, would then, I might solve 80%, and then the 20% would just like, fester, and then turn into 30, and like a virus, and take it over. So ultimately the journey was about forgiving myself and allowing all of me, like the asshole, the saint, the sinner, all of them, to finally say, you're part of this, but you can't get there from here. You can't solve it. The human can't solve it, but it can make a choice to get out of the way and let the divine in. But until I had the human in a place, or until I forgave all my humanness, the divine couldn't really come in, not properly. And that was until very recently, until months ago, really.
It's interesting.
And I'm still dealing with it.
It's interesting looking back, though, right? Because I had the same experience. So you first try to, you come from the point of just being a human, so you've lived in that separation from your true self for so long that you almost forgot it. Then it finally opens up and you go, there it is, right? And then you try to escape the human, so just trying to go into the opposite and going into that other, what you think is the solution to everything. And then realizing, okay, if I don't take the human along, that's kind of pointless, right? Because then I could just pop out of existence.
You could just die and fix it on the other side, but then we all know that doesn't work either. You just reincarnate to do another round. So,
and it's really a bit, I think, about like listening to you sharing, I think is really about coming back to the human, but from that divine perspective, and realizing there's nothing that you're doing wrong, right? So the identity, you need to soften it up in such a way that you can look at it with compassion and empathy. Like we look at our children, or we look at our spouse or our lover, or at a dog, with that kindness, and with it's okay, because all of you makes you perfect, and all of you makes you special.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, and we talked about this earlier, and I want to know what you think about it, is I was under such a misconception, and this is my own experience, so I'm not saying for the listeners that this is how you do it, but for me, after my awakening at 17, it took 30 years until now, and not one dark night of the soul, but about 3, possibly 4, with the last one being very recently, to realize that once I had my awakening, I was on a set trajectory. I was basically on a self-correcting course to my realization. And realization doesn't really care if you do it in this lifetime or the next or whatever. There's no time-based, but somehow I set up for myself that it was this lifetime. But after my awakening, I could have just relaxed. I didn't know how, but I could have just relaxed. And all of the actions I would have done would lead me to this point.
But because you didn't relax, it made you create moments of extreme tension and friction and challenges
and
that
fights and spiritual righteousness
that then made you aware of the human separation that you're still putting in actively,
and the futility of me trying to climb up the mountain for the golden carrot on top, or me trying to clean the human like from one side and then having all the junk basically roll back in from the other. So like I thought until recently, okay, after my realization, so after you reach a sweet spot in basically your balance between your human and your divine, I thought, okay, then there's going to be a moment where it's self-correcting, only then. But it was after my awakening. You have an awakening moment. It's like Jeff says, get out of your way, trust the process. You don't have to do anything spiritual, actually. You don't have to study. And just trust that it will be okay. But I didn't have that reference. And I didn't have that trust either, because I came from a kind of traumatized childhood, and I think everybody does in one way or another. So I'm not even special there. But it is almost trying to avoid that pain, instead of saying, I forgive myself for having that pain, I forgive myself for not trusting the world, I forgive myself for being a guy who's super sensitive and questioning whether I'm a real man or not. And to go, okay, cool, I'm okay with all of that. Now bring in the divinity. That would have been the shortcut. And I think the new generation are vastly doing it, vastly quicker. But it really took me until after realization, until recently, to think, oh my God, it was self-correcting all along.
So, but I think for our listeners who might not be so, who might not come from the angle that we come from, like extreme spirituality, fanatic spirituality.
Welcome to hardcore spirituality.
That's a different podcast.
Should be a channel on Red Bull, like Red Bull Spiritual Plus. This week, after monster truck racing.
But ever since our first episode, and I've listened back to it, and I understand, like in our conversations that we're having, I'm now getting into an understanding that maybe what we put under the cloak of spirituality is a normal evolution of the human into their self-discovery. So basically understanding the full self, and not just the separated version, or the very just brought to the bare minimum of being in a physical body, being in this reality where you have gravity and all of that. So I think it's just opening up the senses to the bigger self, right? To all of the energy that you are, which is becoming so much more known now. Hence, a lot of people don't even use that path of spirituality, or don't need to use that path of spirituality for their self-understanding. I think therapy nowadays has become such a normal thing. What we used as spirituality, now a lot of people understand through therapy, or through holding it against their experiences against somebody that puts things into. Would
you say it's a reflection? So we used the reflection through spirituality. Nowadays, a lot of people using reflection of themselves through therapy. Some use reflection of themselves through yoga or through meditation.
The human journey...
Or sports. I know a couple of people that use sports as a reflection.
The human journey is a journey of reflection, because only through the mirror you understand who you are. Until you finally understand that you are not the mirror. You don't apply the face cream to the mirror, you apply it into your face. So I think for me, that understanding of I need something to bounce something off of me to understand who I am. My actions in this world cause a certain reaction, cause my reality or my perception of reality.
Or give you a certain feedback that seemingly comes from the outside, but really is instigated by yourself.
So I think once the consciousness of the human is mature enough that question arises, I want to find out who I am, what's more to find out about life, that's when you start into your awakening. So again, we've talked about this in our last episode. You and I have gone through it through spirituality. Maybe nowadays I'm just always trying to put the different the different view against it, that maybe somebody listening to it that doesn't come through spirituality doesn't discard it and say, well, they're not talking about my journey. Maybe you're just doing it through a different
well, I think we're unlocking also post Rude Awakening, post film, we're unlocking a set of dynamics. And I had a really cool conversation with a guy from Denmark this morning, and it's all the same dynamics. It's different expressions, different path, different types of reflection that we all use, and that fit a certain inclination or fit a certain expression. Those are all different. Hence, there is no one way of doing this. But a lot of the general dynamics are the same. And whether you call it spirituality, or you call it reflection, or you call it asking the question, who am I, what am I doing here? It's all valid. And it's funny, it's almost like the broader your perspective, or the bigger your consciousness or your perspective gets, the less it is about anything spiritual, really. It's
that
more,
for me is realization. So coming back to why I wanted to put that disclaimer in here, somebody listening to this might not understand what we're talking about. Realization. The realization really just means that you're understanding the bigger picture, and you understand that it's not about the details, it's not about the stories that you're making around it or that you're putting around it. You are understanding yourself through certain modalities, and it doesn't matter what you use. So for me, the short definition, and this is personal, the short definition of realization for me meant that there is a balance between the divine part in me, and some call it knowingness or intuition, it doesn't really matter, and the human working together with that. So it's both acknowledging each other, but the human knowing when it needs to get out of the way for the divine, and the divine knowing when it's time for the human to do stuff. And for me, that sweet spot was, until very recently, last year, and that process keeps going. We keep every day. I keep every day refining that and learning new depths of it. But there was definitely a plateau of that moment where I went, okay, now I'm not shutting the human up or shutting the divinity in myself up. I'm actually now using them both. It's not either or. It's
staying embodied, staying in the planet instead of popping out because, I had my epiphany and poof, I'm gone.
And then you can let go of the truths, because I think it's interesting looking at the world stage, and especially politics, and wherever somebody is getting really passionate about a cause, those are truths. And the fact is that basically everybody is acting from a place of truth within themselves. Like, whether I approve of it or not, I don't need to make that person wrong. But I think realization for me, that moment was when I discovered, okay, there's just so many different ways of knowing yourself or getting to know yourself. Who am I to say what's wrong or what's right? Of course, it's great to have some kind of mass conscious understanding that, we shouldn't really kill each other, or, it's kind of wrong to hurt other people. But ultimately, it all serves the same purpose of knowing yourself and knowing the journey of who am I? Yeah, I agree. And I still find the reflection that we currently use of each other, but also of the movie, like there's all these comments under the YouTube link of Rude Awakening, and there's vastly different opinions, and also people that say, like, I don't get it, and people that say, it's great as entry-level spirituality, but, if you like this, look at, and then listen a bunch of other sources like Moji, or is it Moji or Moji? Muji, I think, and Eckhart Tolle, and it's funny because I find myself being really relaxed about it, because it's literally everybody has a different journey, so I respect everybody's journey, and everybody has a different perspective
that for them works.
And entry point.
Exactly, and probably exit point as well. So it's really cool to also witness myself not getting up in arms about even comments on the movie anymore. It's like, yeah, the only reason for this movie is that it provokes questions, and it makes you think, and it makes you hopefully not feel so alone. And the rest is completely open. I mean, I'd rather have people go, yo, halfway through the movie I lost the plot and I have so many questions. Well, that's fantastic, because now you're asking yourself questions. It would be horrible if I just watch a movie and it just goes like, yeah, I didn't really do anything, and you go like, okay, no questions, nothing. And even that may be an opinion.
The reason why we chose to not use a certain spiritual community as the truth, or use a certain guru as the that point of telling the story, but we use normal people in everyday life that have gone through their journey and using different ways of getting there. That in itself was an ode to the big journey, I think, for me personally, to honor everybody is coming through it in a different way. Not everybody needs to do it this way or that way, and not everybody needs to do it through spirituality even. So in the end, there will always be different perspectives, and I can honor that. And I know that, interesting now, coming back to why, because I used to be a coach, and I used to be very up in arms about this is how you do it, and no wonder you're stuck in life, look at me, this is how I do it, so I'm going to open a practice because I'm such an inspiration to the world. and therefore, meeting a lot of people that reflected another part of myself back to me, and understanding everybody is just doing exactly what they should. They're taking the next step in their self-understanding. Nothing is wrong. I don't even know what's right. So, who am I to get stuck there? And then to step back and say well, I think this is not my position I want to be in, of being the teacher. So I didn't want to get stuck in that. Going into making this movie, I didn't want to get stuck into selling another truth.
No.
It was just about becoming even more flexible and more open.
Well, and I think especially the last months of doing the editing, I think that's a lot of there's a lot of actions that we took to put that to take that truth out of there, because there was fantastic quotes. But we took a lot of lingo out and a lot of truth that the people we interviewed didn't really have that much of truths, but it could be perceived as such here and there. Tone of voice, or speaking in we instead of I, and we cut it all out, because ultimately the more you watch the movie, so the more you get towards the end, I really wanted people to almost like get my opinion out of it, and let people feel into where they are in the movie. And of course you have the big monologue in the end, but that's wrapping up my story, and I'm not saying it's the story of everybody else. And it was so important that we did that, and we only managed to do that in the last moment, because it was much more sort of truth driven content in there. And now it's like I can't imagine it being different.
But those reminders, like from a Marisa saying, you want the break from spirituality. You want the break from constantly needing to reflect, constantly reading into what does this mean? Because, of course, you could say that everything has a reason. But that is not being kind to the human, because my human also needs to be in joy and needs to be in... And
the moment you dig, you will find stuff. So stop digging. And I'm noticing it, we're working on the marketing of the movie, and I'm very proud of us. It's very intuitive. It's very go with the flow, follow impulses, let it go, follow impulses, action, sit back, just do something else. And it's wonderful how fast it goes and how beautiful the feedback is from the films, the project. It's effortless. But I can't count the mornings that I wake up in a panic that I must do something, I forgot something. So that spiritual, am I on, it's still active. I'm not exempt from it. I just really need to sort of take a deep breath and go, okay, you know what happens if you just do the control freak thing. Can you take a deep breath, feel the panic? Don't even deny the human. You think you have to do something, take a walk, do something else, and then just allow it anyway. Just completely step aside. And now I can actually make that choice. But I still have to do daily maintenance for it. It's becoming easier, but it's not like breathing. And I think it will eventually get there. But it's there's still a point where I'm catching myself doing the same thing I did with the spiritual, the constantly, the spiritual person, or how do you say that? Like the control freak posing as a spiritual person that's guarding all the fences, see if there's a hole in the fence. Did I miss anything? Are the cannons still working? Instead of just going, no defense, nothing to do. Just I completely trust.
It really is the switching of gears now, because that way of being made sure that you wouldn't get stuck.
Yeah.
So being the hyper vigilant, hyper observant, almost like, I mean, I'm allowed to say this, the spiritual Nazi, like watching yourself fanatically and frantically, that brought you to the point of being really committed to finding out who you are. I don't think it's absolutely necessary, but that I can relate to it. That's how it was for me.
And I think forgiving myself for all of that, I think we're just overstayed that welcome by a few years, right? Now I have so much experience on the other side of trusting and allowing, and what happens if I allow while running a project, which is very possible, and doing your daily, the things you need to do. I'm figuring out how that actually works, how I can take actions from that inspired, passionate place and still leave enough room for magic to happen. So don't fill it in too much, don't put a timeline on it, which is kind of odd when you're producing the marketing of a movie. But yeah, I think that's that part also, that part that basically got me here after 30 years, which I'm very thankful for, but it has no job. So it's sitting in the corner and going cold turkey, and sometimes it just flares up. And it just needs enough feedback and reference so that it just completely...
And being welcome, part being welcome into my fullness now, that it's okay, it's not becoming obsolete just because I don't need to work at big issues anymore. That doesn't mean that I can't allow that part to be part of who I am now or part of the experience. So let's go for a drink, let's go for a ride, let's have some fun, let's go dance, to becoming more human. Yeah. Ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that part of am I on, or reading into the things, I feel it getting lighter each day, even though there's sometimes flare-ups or... It's starting to become fun now, like really, really fun.
Well, you don't need to control it,
No.
Like even let's say there
and
are...
for an ex-control freak, that's I certainly have a lot of time and energy in my hands now. Like oh shit, and then when I do need to take an action, it's so fast.
It's the intuition. It just comes in from coming from a very mental perspective, trying to read stuff into it. It's now coming through the intuition, and that's why you can let it go. Because if I need to know something, I will know it in the moment. I don't need to, check all of the radio stations in my head to constantly
or look at the outside for signs.
Yeah. So, and I mean, looking at the world stage right now with the wars going on, or a lot of unrest. Of course, I could read into it and go like, well, there's a lot of friction, there's a lot of energy that needs to be balanced out, and there's a lot of, like, what sort of forces do we need to conjure up to make sure it gets balanced? It will get balanced either way.
Yeah.
As the human, it is not my job to come up with it or to create it or craft it or control it.
No, and I like the analogy of... Before you save, like the best way to save the world is to save yourself first, is to be the standard, to be another light on the planet, and basically your own light, not a light for the planet, but basically take full responsibility for your own divinity and you're human.
We've made a documentary about sustainability.
Yeah.
Truly.
It's self-sustainability. It's not grassroots on company level. It's grassroots on self level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should get government help or something.
Maybe there's a grant out there somewhere. Yeah, so I think just to wrap it up, I love what Marisa said, and I love the fact, and I'm seeing this in you, and you're seeing it in me probably, is I'm starting to really relax. To I call it leaning into the trust, leaning into the divinity, leaning into the magic. But as more as I'm leaning into that, I'm also leaning into my human.
Yeah.
So when I do choose to do human things or go out or have a bottle of wine or two or whatever, as long as it's a free choice, even hey, there's a lot of tension, and I just need to distract myself because I'm way too mental and I can't get out of my head. Fine, drink a bottle of wine or go have a walk. But as long as it's from a free place, it's fine. So it's acknowledging both the divine and the human, and usually it just dissipates really quickly.
Because in the past, like, you wouldn't allow yourself to do these things, right? In the past, you would or
feel guilty, or
let's have like extreme, horrible fast food and cake and everything, and have that. But then also judge myself for it. So I'm constantly in the same friction. But now just diving into it, saying like, okay, fuck it, that's just what I'm going to do now, and then I'm going to snap out of it.
Yeah, with my full faculties intact from a free choice. Fully committing into it, right, for the time it lasts, and then coming out of it with no judgment and no story, especially.
But what's the setup there? And that's really interesting. I think forgiving yourself, but also at the same time, that in itself is a huge one. But then also not only forgiving myself, but also allowing myself to change my mind, or allowing myself to be different the next day, because that used to be the biggest thing. I need to be predictable for myself, because otherwise I think I'm going insane. Or I need to be predictable for my social circle or whatever, right? And now it's just like, okay, so say for example, because I used to be a vegetarian for 8 years, I loved that phase of my life. I also used to do a lot of fasting. I also used to not drink for a while. But to hold all of it lightly, rather than a truth that you have to again control, or have it control you. So now being able, because I just wanted to expand on that, when you say, as long as it's a free choice, what does that mean? It means that I'm being flexible with feeling what is actually now
what do you
the
need?
impulse.
What do you need in the moment?
Exactly.
And that could change from, like, I used to have that horribly feeling, well, you committed to something and now you have to keep, I was always riding my own ass about but you said you committed, now commit, or you said a truth, now stick to that truth.
Yeah. For
months, sometimes years, before I could say, oh yeah, actually that wasn't healthy. Now I can change my mind in an hour, as long as it's my truth for me. And I love that expression, after realization, you're not beholden to anybody or anything. It's kind of that. I say to myself, and you heard me say a lot of times, oh man, I'm going to quit drinking alcohol. And then fail like within hours.
It used to be like a regular thing, like a weekly thing. With Jonathan.
Now I'm not saying it. Sometimes I do, but mostly I don't. And I mostly drink only in the weekend. So it's kind of leveled out by itself. For me, basically not putting any rigid ideas about it. It's just like, it makes me feel better. I don't need it as a distraction or as a, to calm down my nerves, because I am calm. And now it's like, I love to have it with a good dinner or when I'm with friends, but it's a completely different situation. But because I was relaxed to myself, it could sort of level out.
And because you overdid it for a long time, and in both ways. So I think,
yes.
That really is for me the summary of today's episode. When Marisa says, just, have some fun, just relax, just let it go, and just be in the moment and really feel the impulse of what feels right now. And having gone through all of the different spectrums, like being on that side or on that side for a long time, being only a little stuck focused human versus needing to go and be only divine and spiritual, now it's come together. And from that being together, the separation just goes. And then you can choose freely.
Yeah.
So we're going to go have a drink?
Sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah, and just to add to that, because I think it's interesting. I mean, this is why I got really confused in being rigid with myself. But ultimately, I couldn't believe it was self-correcting.
No.
And I think what Marisa says is just have some fun. I couldn't have fun because for me, the whole spiritual thing and reaching this state of realization was a life or death situation. It was really important. I made it very important. But if I would have known at 17 that this whole thing from my kind of rude awakening moment was self-correcting, I would have partied my ass off, probably to some excess, and would have done this a lot sooner. I mean, I couldn't have formulated all the chapters for the movie, not that,
but that's a good point.
Eloquently. So it was really my journey to take 30 years to basically take every detour possible so I can actually make a film about it.
So you really understand it.
Exactly. So again, I forgive myself for that, but I think the young generation, and I keep coming back to that, once they intuitively get, hey, once I have this moment of I want to know myself truly better and deeper, it's on autopilot. I can go completely berserk and still end up at the right spot. So instead of flagellating yourself with doctrines and spiritual courses and I have to do this and I have to do that, have some fun, keep moving on your intuition, and you will get there. So I think they're going to take such massive detours, and rightly so, because it is, from that moment on, it is, in what I've seen, self-correcting. And I think that's the biggest difference between our generation and the younger is I didn't believe it was from the moment you awaken it's self-corrected. I thought you had to reach a certain level, very old spiritual doctrine. You had a certain level of enlightenment for it to be self-correcting. And I was always like kicking that stone in front of me. So I was never getting there.
Look at the generation that we grew up in, both born in 75. Now everybody knows how old we are. Get that out of the way. But I think, change in each generation takes a different amount of time. Looking at the generation from my parents and their parents and even before that, and even that is a very, very small spectrum to look at, because if, we're coming back to consciousness being available on Earth, that has just been this hockey stick movement where it just becomes quicker and quicker and quicker. So you don't need to go through those long suffering or the long the long learning curves or the long training or whatever. The understanding of self will now become a natural byproduct of people living.
And there's much more information available. Rude Awakening is out, but we're not the only ones. There's tons of podcasts of people that are dealing with the same subject from different angles, different perspectives. So there's so much information out there to also sink your teeth in.
Yeah, which is great. And at the same time, I'm at a place where I'm getting nauseous looking at my Instagram feed, because at some point I thought it was a good idea to follow all of the spiritual teachers and all of the motivational speakers, and now it's just becoming this, I just want to drop it at some point and just go, just have some fun. There's birds, don't constantly.
Just sit on a couch, on a bench in the sun with a stupid grin on your face, and that's it. I'm alive. I'm having fun.
Exactly. It's a great conclusion for this podcast.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. This was fun.
Thank you, Sandra. That was nice. So,
if you haven't seen the documentary yet, you can still go to YouTube or to our website, www.rudeawakening-film.com. Dive into the free version that is on the website, but also maybe you want to check out the bonus pack, which contains of so much more material, hours and hours and hours worth of interviews, also an interview with Jonathan. And yeah, just have a look and let us know what you think. We have an email address for you to write in if you want to. podcast@rudeawakening-film.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'm looking forward to next week.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I mean, with the amount of stuff that's been shifting this week, God knows where we will be.
Yeah, but first we're going to have a drink.
Yes. Cheers.
Cheers.